Welcome to Synchronicity. My guests this week, Mikey and Mikey and Stevie. No, that's not right. Mikey and Steven Kampmann from the Dreams Course podcast. You know Mikey and Steven as previous guests to this show. I'm fucking all over the place. Guys, how are you? By the way, how's life? How's everything going? It's pretty fucking wild out there, huh? Tipsy topsy turvy Bardo states. That's what's going on. It's cool. Fun times. We're doing great. Just hang in there. I've been doing a fair amount of microdosing of mushrooms mixed in with a little LSD. It's good times. I feel like it's the correct vibe for right now. So hopefully you're doing well too. This episode is fucking great. They're cool people. We talk a lot about how dreams, my interpretation. I mentioned we're all dead. We go over that again. How this is a dream, so anything that we can glean from our nighttime dreams, this world is also reflecting the same type of energy back to us. So there's a lot of practical shit in here. It's cool. I like the vibe too, the generational vibe between Steven and Mikey and me. There's cool shit that we get to explore with that. I think you're gonna love this episode. I always know it's a great conversation with either of these guys. Having them both together is a real treat. Go check out their podcast, Dreams Course Podcast. Also, if you're interested in what Steven is offering with the Dreams Course, you'll hear more about it in this episode. Go check him out, and there'll be links to all that in this episode. Big shout out to my motherfucking friends at Ned. Go to helloned.com. Use the code SYNC, SYNC at checkout. You get 15% off anything you order. Full spectrum CBD, hemp oil. They have the sleep blend, the women's blend for period stuff, which is the worst way to describe that period stuff. I don't know. Menstruation? Jeez Louise. They have magnesium supplements now mixed with CBD. They're just cool fucking people. I'm looking forward to the day when they can just sell straight up weed. That's going to be amazing. When we can just ship it across the country. Get it together, New York. Get it together. But go helloned.com, SYNC at checkout, 15% off. They're fucking great. I love those guys. They've been my longest sponsor now for almost 2-3 years, and it's just a really nice relationship. I hear when you guys, I love hearing when you like get the stuff and you send it in and you're like, it's fucking amazing. Thank you so much. It's cool when you find, I am someone who's traditionally skeptical of sponsorships, right? It's like they're paying you money to talk about their shit, but I tried their stuff and I had fucking spoken to these guys a couple of years ago. They're just legit amazing people. And if you're going to be getting CBD stuff, which is notoriously sketchy and kind of like fucking, you don't know what's going on, these people literally are the most transparent I've ever seen. They're playing fucking binaural beats to their plants. They're cool as shit. So big thanks to Ned. Love you guys. Keep it going. That's about it for the intro. Mike and Steven fucking rule. Go check out their shit. There's Patreon stuff going on. We have the Q&As a couple times a month. We're doing some bonus episodes. Going to get a podcast up there with Ryan Singer soon. We're trying to coordinate that. I was trying to go to Nashville for November, but November just had other plans, huh? Did you have plans in November? Because I guarantee they fucking got changed somehow, some way. It's just the vibe. It's okay. Maintain your imaginal felt feeling of knowing that what you imagined is coming, because it will. Have you been experiencing more synchronicities lately? I think a lot of people have, where this veil is being ever so subtly lifted, and I think we're just coming to terms with that. That's what a lot of the rest of this year is. So stay tuned there. Live readings. Oh, and Twitch. Go check it out on Twitch. I stream there. It's fun. It's fucking great. Okay, that's it. Without further ado, here is Steven and Mikey Kampmann. Jump in. We can start it whenever. What's going on, guys? How have you been, respectively, each of you? This is going to be fun to record, by the way.
Yeah, it's pretty wild to think we're sitting here in all these different locations and talking about the spirit everywhere.
It's weird. I mean, we'll just jump right in. People know who both of you are at this point, I'm sure, so I'll do an intro if anything. But I heard the episode you guys we're talking about heaven, I think, and how heaven is kind of a perception of this reality, if you can kind of step into that. And this is certainly something that I feel like I've had a pretty direct experience of like walking through that. It's at several different distinct points in my life, but really like stabilizing that perspective, regardless of what filters in kind of externally, has been something that's kind of been my main modality or way I've been approaching the world for the past year and a half, which is a weird fucking time to kind of what you would say, like enter the gates of the kingdom of heaven. Because objectively, shit ain't great. So I
Yeah.
mean, I know what importance dreams have had for both of you. I know you both as like very introspective, deep thinking people. Mikey through your comedy, Steven mainly through the conversations we've had. So like how are you navigating the terrain? That's a good,
Right.
no pun intended, with these maps we're looking at, but like how have you been navigating the terrain over the past of 2020? Let's just say that.
Well,
Yeah, I think. Well, can I say something, Dad?
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. You have my permission. Yes. Okay. Go for it, Mike.
um, has there ever been a better time to try to realize heaven on earth?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
if as my dad, as Steven says all the time, you know, the external world is in chaos. So this is a great time, probably the most significant time to turn to the internal world and find that sense of um, of serenity or a sense of decency within yourself, and so that you can be that not only for your own perception but for other people in the community of that you interact with.
Yeah.
Right.
I think
Right. I
the,
mean, it
the
is this moment. Yeah.
well, the dreams course, which I've been teaching for years, I never felt the timing has been better for the reasons Mikey has said. Because it's chaotic, you can't say to a young person, and most of the people that are in my group are young, 20s or 30s, and most of them are women, and that's a separate subject. But the reality is they're looking out at a world when they're young going, what's it going to give me? Climate issues, uh, the politics, goes on and on and on and on. And finally, coming back into the inner world and following your inner path is the secret. It's
Right.
comforting. It takes away some of the anxiety because you have a certain amount of control of it, which you have no control going on in the world. So,
Right. I mean, this is where, yeah, this is where I know our last conversations were about this. Mikey, you'll just be plugged into them. I mean, I've been acutely interested in the connection between how our internal states of consciousness, belief structures literally are manifested and reflected back to us externally, right?
Mm,
Whether in relationships or geography or situations, it's just like what we fully believe in aggregate is what our experience of this particular dimension, slice of time and space that we carve through linearly, or though it appears we do. I don't think that we
absolutely.
actually are. Yeah.
Like, take the analogy of throwing a rock into a pond and it ripples, right? So in that analogy, your energy is the rock. So your internal shifting spaces, those are rocks that you keep throwing out into the world. And those
Right.
ripples are like a call and response to the energy you're putting out.
hmm,
Yeah. It's
yeah.
it's it's literally what's happening, and I think what catches us sometimes is when we get those ripples back and they're not what we wanted, or they're not what we expected, which expectations can have a lot of this. It's how to recognize that as a calibrating mechanism for our own internal states rather than externalizing or projecting and blaming those ripples that come back, because I really do think that's what it is. And I think I know you two definitely would agree that, like, whether it's in dreams or just in a quiet moment of contemplation or just in like a song or a feeling, whatever it is, there is this very peaceful, calming, loving energy that feels, I don't want to use the word home explicitly, but it's very like familiar. It feels like the kind of basis of what we're experiencing. So, how to get in touch and calibrate in a world that seems to be so far out of whack? is where we find ourselves. I mean, what have you guys been doing over the past year?
Okay,
primarily?
so I'll give you an idea about how things have connected for us. In the last year, the pandemic obviously has changed the calculus of everything. And as it worked out this summer, Mikey ended up here in Maine with us for 3 months. And it was like a strange blessing because at this age, you don't expect to spend that kind of time with anybody, in your family, your sons or daughters. And we did, and we started to connect, and we started to connect on the spiritual thing, and that brought us to the quotes, which I'll let Mikey explain a little bit about that. But basically, for the last 9 years, I've been memorizing different quotes that inspire me, and I had sent them to Mikey, and he had the idea that. Wait, let me just turn this off. He had the idea that maybe what we should do, because we were having good conversations, is copy those uh, quotes and put them into a hat, and then pick one and then discuss it. And we did it. We did a couple, and out of it became really good conversation, not only between about the material, but for us. We'd never had these kind of conversations as a father and son. So that's what
Right.
we've been doing. And in terms of everything else, I have Parkinson's. And so
Yeah.
working on these kind of quotes and thinking about these sort of things has been another blessing for me, because it
Mm,
keeps everything active and present centered. So in an odd way, this
yeah.
time since the pandemic has started, has been, everyone's healthy, which is good, and it's also been an opportunity for the two of us to connect in a way that we hadn't before, right? So,
Yeah.
and
It's a
and and
it's a
Mikey had the
beautiful
idea
thing.
of like the quotes idea, right, Mike?
Yeah, well, I mean, you had memorized these quotes. You said you was, I mean, when you sent it to me, I thought you were insane because you were spending a half an hour a day reciting these memorized quotes. I mean, it was like, I was just thinking like, why do you miss life? Like, what are you doing with your time, man? And,
Yeah, he's right.
but, but yeah, but then let's say, okay, let's break down each one. Like, why did you select this? Like,
Yeah.
what's the message in here that you attach to, that you find some sort of as like a mantra? What is it that speaks to you? And let's use that as a spark for conversation. And what I think, and to kind of get to what you were talking about, like what have we done this last year, is that these conversations have led us to the spirit, this
Mm,
Yeah.
sense of the spirit, as a juxtaposition to um, the chaos and the ego.
Yeah.
Um, and we, in one of our earlier um, conversations, we talked about the 5 foods of the spirit and
yeah,
how you can feed the spirit on a
right.
daily basis.
That you have to.
And that has been like a fantastic guiding light for this time, um, honoring that internal uh, health. Really focusing on that. If you can start there, that's a that's going to set you up for a great day every day.
Yeah.
And if
What are
you,
the 5 things?
well,
Not to
the
blow the whole episode. Listen
no,
to the
no, no,
episode,
no,
but
No, it's
what are
okay.
the 5 things? Yeah.
each one, I remember we were just sitting in the living room having this conversation, and when it was done, I said, we should do some version of this, because it's interesting. The 5 foods, and the idea is that the spirit in us is so distracted by all the external events going on, the spirit never gets recognized.
Yeah.
And so we said, well, how would we
Unnurtured.
nurtured? Really, that's the key word. Most of the people I'm dealing with aren't nurturing the spirit.
Yeah.
They're nurturing the externals of their lives, resumes, jobs, boyfriends, girlfriends, that kind of thing. And so we said, well,
Yeah.
what would be 5? And we said, well, breathing, learning how to breathe well is important. The spirit
Mm.
likes that. And the spirit loves seeing any form of beauty. beauty inspires the spirit, as we all know. We've all taken hikes and walks and
Yeah.
or been on the ocean or seen a sunset. And I have an Instagram that is nothing but beautiful shots. And so that's that. And then the third thing is do something creative every day. The fourth thing is
Yeah.
gratitude for what's in your life now. And five, do something of service to others. Like when you're doing your show, Noah,
Mm.
that's for the people that are listening and the way we're connecting with people. That's a service because it's giving them, and I've experienced it directly because of your show. People then have reached out to me and then have gotten them into the Dreams
That's
course.
cool.
So you don't have to
Yeah.
create a podcast, but you do need to think, what can I do creative today, somewhere in the course of the day? And our thinking is if you did all five every day, you'd be in pretty good shape. That's the idea.
I agree with that. I agree with that. The breathing one, I think, is one I need to remember
Yeah.
Yeah.
more often than not. I've noticed in times of stress or chaos, and I think what we're talking about here, just whether we put it in explicit Jungian terms or just kind of metaphysical terms, it's this idea of this balance between chaos and cosmos, right? So chaos being this kind of like out of control, it's not a judgmental thing, but like a expansive kind of no boundaries type thing, and then an order and structure, an internal harmony to things beyond the cosmos. And I think a lot of what we do is filter kind of this external chaos through our internal perceptive kind of mechanism into an internal cosmos. And then we recognize very clearly that, like, whatever is generating our feelings and our awareness, whenever we localize that, whenever we have those moments of lucidity, we recognize, like, holy shit, that's literally what's being reflected back to me. And that's where I think a lot of people, I know as this podcast has gotten like more people's attention, like people are, it feels to me right now, I'm interested to talk to you guys about this, like kind of like a bardo state, kind of like this in between point of uncertainty where like we haven't fully manifested into the new dimension or way of being, but we can sense that something's coming. It's like we're in the birth canal. And I
Mm.
feel like this could be perpetuated kind of infinitely, but intuitively, I know it won't. But I know a lot of people, I do these readings and people come to me, and that's been a general kind of feeling that people are moving through. And I'm wondering, like, how you guys, if you've encountered that, and you like how I keep leaving open-ended questions, by the way, for either of you to pick without directing them towards anyone. It's a sign of a true interviewer. But I'm wondering if you guys,
Hey, man, there's a lot of questions within the birth canal. You know what I mean?
yeah, right. I mean, I'm wondering when you encounter that type of energy of like, shit, I feel like I'm an in between state. What do you do in those types of moments? What do you like think about? What's kind of like your internal beacon? Because I think that differs from person to person. So whoever wants that can have at it.
I got something. Perception,
Yeah.
right? So here's the trippiest thing: is that that chaos and that cosmos are coexisting simultaneously.
Right.
There is no difference other than perception, and that
Um,
can be like that can be a I don't know, a hard, challenging, maybe sometimes frustrating lesson to learn and relearn and relearn.
Yeah.
Um,
uh, let me.
Especially if you apply it to things like morality. Yeah.
Well, I want to jump on that perception because I think ultimately the Dreams Course and the Dreams Course podcast are trying to change perception. For example, I was watching a football game last night, and my team lost, and I was bummed out. And then I said to myself, "Why am I bummed out? This is just a tape that I've been playing whenever the team is lost my whole life. I'm responding, reacting to
You know,
absolute
I'm
bullshit."
laughing because I'm a Dolphins fan. This is
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, but it's just I sat there and I go, I'm really feeling badly over what? These are millionaires playing a game that know nothing about me. They don't give a shit about me, and I'm sitting here feeling badly. Oh, that's not me. That's the tape I've been playing. And if I change the perception by changing the tape and go, why not be in a good mood? Why not choose a good mood? You can begin in second, like magic. Change it. But all my life, I've been playing
you
the
know,
tape and reacting to it. So people
The
that
reason I'm
you
laughing,
well,
I need to tell you the reason I'm laughing because
okay.
I've long said that my biggest spiritual practice is being a Miami Dolphins fan. And I mean this like people think I'm dead serious because I literally had to learn this lesson over like 35 years, 30 years. And now what's hilarious to me is they're good now. I don't know if you guys have been noticing, but they're actually good. It's not that they just don't suck. They're actually like winning games. They're good. Here's the thing, anything in life will teach you this exact primary lesson that it's your responsibility to dictate your perception and feelings about anything. What I've found to be particularly cool and neat, and there are boundaries to this, are only the boundaries of your imagination limitation. You can basically predetermine certain states of consciousness by welcoming them in because
Mm,
what feels like happening is like time. Everyone kind of acknowledges that time doesn't work the way we perceive it to exist in linear fashion. Like, well, you do enough psychedelics, you do enough dream work, you do enough internal stuff, you just get quiet enough, you recognize it's not as solid as we perceive it to be.
Yeah.
If that's true, we have this ability to kind of quantum leap and change our perception at any given time. That's realization number one. I think what a lot of people in this birth canal, what it feels like to me, they're learning how to like stabilize certain perceptions, certain modes of being that are more in resonance with what they'd like to see. And that beauty thing that's in that five, I think is incredibly important. I had my 4-year-old say to me, this shit, it shook me to my core. We were watching some weird crash show he likes on YouTube where these horrific crashes and fucking animated computer generated reality. So he likes it. I don't know. He genuinely likes it. It doesn't seem like he's like a sociopath because of it. But there's this part where like clearly the guy's not surviving, this crash dummy. And we're like, he'll be back, or we didn't know what to say. And it was me and my dad. And he's like, oh, maybe he just went to go find something more beautiful. And I'm like, oh my God, you're like a fucking genius.
Yeah.
This is literally the perspective of a 4-year-old or an innocent kind of child. That's like, it's not about the transitory states that we go through, but it's kind of letting the beauty of what we want kind of to populate our minds
right.
and therefore our worlds. So the game that I've seen emerge a lot in 2020 is like when we capture that internal state, how do we maintain and sustain it when we see a world objectively that can be anything but
All
that it's
right.
completely dissonant with? And I think that's a calibration for all of us. And I think you guys, like, just speaking with you now and knowing you guys, like, seems like you've done it. Seems like you've really have solidified this internal conviction and faith and belief in your core being, which to me makes me incredibly optimistic that going forward, like, we see more of this in the world, right? Whether that's just from these
Yeah.
conversations or people like, I don't know if you guys see it, but I know people are building communities all over the country, all over the world, where people are kind of locking into the primary importance of their immediate beauty that always surrounds them, whether that's the earth or relationships or just like, I don't know, a good
A
TV show.
big
Yeah.
a big characteristic of this time 2020 is we're more fully realizing how bankrupt our way of living has become, right? So these things that shape us through childhood and as we enter the adult world and all the expectations of Western civilization of what it means to be a successful person, these things are material, empty ideas. Um, and so your son who's talking about going to a more beautiful place, he's closer to the source when his mind hasn't
Right.
been fully sculpted by this fucked up
Trashed.
culture,
Trashed.
Right.
There's a
trashed
thing
culture. So
I want. Yeah. Go ahead, Mike. Finish. Uh,
no, so I just think like this is a good moment to sort of, in the same way that Stephen has to sort of undo some of his tapes that have that are linked to Parkinson's. We right now can sort of start by unlearning everything that we've
yeah.
been taught from
It's
from the culture.
it's like
Mm.
it's my course doesn't. I do one-on-one. I don't do group stuff because it's so much more dynamic. It's like what we're doing now, and you get such
Yeah.
a different kind of intimacy and response. But in my course, because of the issue of being hanging on to old crap of ways of perceiving things we learned in childhood to survive, they're no longer useful to us as we get older. We survived and we're in a different place, but we've held on to those reactions. And in the course, I don't go into the past very much. I go, look, your parents got you here. You're on the planet. Now, how you spend that time is up to you. So don't cry about everything that happened before you. Use that as an opportunity to move forward. And in doing that, what
Mm.
I've created is that, like in these things I've memorized, I brought that into my course. My students, and it's very interesting, like a lot of the females I have are really dynamic people. And they're the kind of people you want to work with because they're motivated, they have jobs, they have a lot of skill sets, but the one area that they're not strong in is the animus, which is the Jungian kind of male part of who they are. And so I set out
Right, the
and
masculine.
I created what I created. I created, with the help of one of the students, 18 quotes from women that are really powerful animus quotes. And they pick out three of the ones they
That's
like,
cool.
and then they add another. I add the poem, The Invitation, and I add one more, and then they memorize them. And when they memorize
Mm.
them, when they get into a situation where they need their animus to be strong, they can literally say the quote, in their head, and their to remind them to be strong, to stand up to the situation they're in. And I'm finding that what's really dynamic is watching people able to change their perception because they're changing the way they think on a given situation. It's much more aggressive, much more fulfilling of the internal process. Hey, I had an
Right,
idea.
because you have
Would
that
you
choice.
I was gonna read just a couple of things, but why don't we do what Mikey and I do? We've never done that with a third person, where I pick
Let's
out of
do
a
it.
hat and do it, and do it. By the way, my first quote I memorized began with the Buddha quote, "All conditioned things are subject to decay, so strive on tirelessly." And then I did "Follow your bliss,
Mm.
and doors will open where walls once used to be." And then I took the monologue. It tells you
Yeah.
how different everyone is different. So my idea is that every person I work with or that listens to the podcast, they're going to memorize their own mantra that fits the area where they need strength to go against the old tapes and the old perceptions, so that your mantra would
Mm.
be different than mine, which is different than Mikey's, that is different than for my students. It's your personal one. It's like taking your mind to the gym every day. And I have them say it 3 or 4 times. And then so one of the ones I have is the Goodwill Hunting scene with Will Robin Williams and Matt Damon, where he's saying, if I asked you about art, I bet you'd give me all the skinny on every art book ever written. A lot about him, life work criticisms, but you can't tell me what it smells like in the Sistine Chapel because you've never been there. Well, I ended up memorizing. So anyway, those were the
Right.
first three, and I probably need to do 90 now. So why don't I reach into the book here, and I'll pick one, and then we'll just discuss that quote in any way it relates to our lives here. Okay?
I'm always into it. I'm always into it.
You are. All right. Here we go.
Dad,
Oh,
you gotta put the microphone
oh.
near the paper so we can hear them
Okay.
shuffling
The
around.
actual
Here,
rustle.
Yeah, we like the rustle.
can you hear anything?
Oh, that's
Oh
that's
yeah.
good wrestling. Oh
Okay,
yeah.
I'm wrestling. All right, let me pick one. Ah, Hermann Hesse. The all right, and so I'll read it off, and then we'll come back to it, and we just take it to wherever it goes. The true profession of man is finding his way to himself. Hermann Hesse. The true profession of
I
man is
agree with
finding
that.
his way to himself, which is pretty much what the course is about, because we believe
Right.
that the spirit has been the underdog. That's why we have the five foods. And that the real task of every one of our lives is to figure out who you are really, authentically, and what's your purpose on the planet. And that's the journey to the self. And individuation is your particular journey, how you get to the self. So this quote really is at the core of pretty much everything that I'm teaching. Any responses?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, I've always kind of thought about that where it's like people ask you what your career is, what's your job? You know, what do you do for a living? And um, I've always kind of thought about that internal work and as the real work, you know.
Mhm.
Uh-huh. Um, Obviously we all have jobs pay to pay for life, to live, but especially whenever I have done psychedelics, I always think of that as like, okay, I'm putting on the construction hard hat and the vest, and we're gonna start doing some real work here.
To
That's
get
why I
somewhere.
take
So,
psychedelics.
so if I said that, so Noah, if I said to you, what do you think right now is your path right now to yourself, to your real, authentic self? What would you say?
Yeah, I think right now I've been discovering that I've put myself on this path where if I don't honor the creative aspect, like not based in output, but just like getting into the creative mindset. If I don't honor that, everything in my life turns quite chaotic and there's that nagging inner voice that's like, "Hey, you could fix all this if you just do what you're supposed to do." Even if it doesn't fit into reality. And I have enough evidence in my life that when I followed that kind of inner knowing, it leads me to the right places. And right now for me, that's like doing what we're doing now. It's been giving these readings. I've been talking to a lot of people about what they're going through, making a lot of music, listening to music. I also find myself, you know how like you have all these plans to do things, but then you actually find yourself doing a lot of other things. Like I find myself driving back and forth, whether it's with my kids or to my partners or to my dad's. Like I'm just driving a lot. And I'm like, what? There's a lesson here. Like I'm supposed to be learning some lesson of like transitions here. Let me try to figure out what that is. So, I'm enjoying. I also like you guys really put a premium on being in beautiful places and appreciating the beauty regardless of where I am, whether that's in a city or in nature. I found myself being in nature more often than not, like 3 or 4 years ago. And I find that to be like a constant state of like, I feel like I'm in the right place. And when I feel like I'm in the right place, it's a matter of just like honoring what internally feels like something I have to do, and I feel like that's a way of creating more beauty in the world is just honoring that, um, kind of more than anything because it feels the most honest, uh, just and authentic for me. And sometimes that looks, just to be clear, like to other people, like I'm a nutball or like, I'm making a
Mhm.
wrong move or I'm doing something that's, lacking empathy. But I trust myself, I guess, a lot at this point. That's what I learned over this past year, regardless and like through everything that like I do trust myself and good things tend to follow from that. So
That's huge,
yeah.
though. To start to trust yourself is really, really, that's the way that you find your way back to yourself when you start trusting the instinctive part of who you are and you're listening to those voices, which is why dreams are significant for the course, because in
Yeah.
dreams you're communicating the unconscious, visually unconscious, and you're marrying it with the conscious. You're diving deep to go in and get information and then follow that information, so that if you get a message, a certain kind of message in your dream life, um, then it's your job to kind of follow up on that and explore what that means in your real life, your external life. Now, when you're taking your inner life from the night dreams and applying them into the daily life, you're beginning to live in the inner outer path, because you're trusting that the dreams are sending you relevant information you need to know about. That may be an area that needs to be nurtured, or a part of you that needs to shut up. You know, that there's a voice that's too loud and the other voices can't be heard, and it's your job as the kind of conductor of the voice orchestra to figure out which voices are speaking the loudest to me, and which are the ones to be nurtured. And the dreams are giving you that information every night. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Well, you
and that builds the
here's
trust.
my thoughts. I think so like I think this world is a dream, right? I think the best way we're looking like the way I think about it is this. Like if we are casting a shadow from a three-dimensional reality, what will appear is a flat depiction of that shadow, like on a wall or a surface, right? That's all a two-dimensional being can perceive of a three-dimensional reality. I'm quite sure we're in a three-dimensional reality. You can argue that time is the fourth dimension, but there are higher dimensional realities. I think most people who have any awareness of themselves will admit that, at least who are listening to this podcast. My question is like, where do we want to go with that knowledge? Like, do we transcend
Magic.
magic? So this is right. It's magic. And also like, here's the thing, like this reality is the dream. Like we crossed over from that liminal boundary that like we go to sleep. Of course, there's still a dream world. We process a lot of stuff, thank God, in dreams that we don't have to process in this physical reality. It'd be a fucking nightmare sometimes. Some of
Right.
us do process it here if we like hold on to it long enough. But this reality seems to be functioning. So what I love about the dreams course specifically now is that this stuff is so directly applicable to the content of what people are experiencing on a daily waking basis, that you now have these two-pronged kind of levels of engaging with reality and taking neither at face value, whether it's a dream saying this is the ultimate reality or this reality that we experience here is ultimately, but only your internal beacon of kind of like what you believe to be true. That's reality. Tweaking that lever is I think what we're all talking about, and trying to find where that is and how that fits into this broader collective thing we're doing here without getting out of resonance with too many people.
Yeah.
Unless that's your thing, which is also okay.
It's funny because
Yeah.
when we're
There's
no, let me just finish this quick thought. That when it's funny you say about treating it like it's a dream that we're in, because that's how I've changed teaching the book Damien by Herman Hesse. I treat the whole novel like it's a dream, and that you're picking up the different Jungian figures in that dream, the animus, the anima, the shadows, the self, and all those aspects that Hess himself had learned when he underwent psychotherapy with Joseph Frank back in 1916 or so, and he wanted to write a book on individuation. And it came to me this year that I should teach it like a dream, not teach it like it's two-dimensional. Treat it like it's coming to it's a dream of a man that's undergoing individuation, and dreams are a big part of that. And it makes it a totally different perspective on teaching it, perception of the book and appreciation of the book. And so I kind of, in a way, I guess I'm reaffirming what you just said, Noah, about the dream aspect of everything. Magic.
I want to. Yeah, I want to hear. That's what I was going to say. I want to hear Mikey talk about magic.
Yeah. Well, I as of late, I've been super concentrated on the idea of the magical universe existing right now, and wanting to access that universe as often as possible, because it's a lot better than the alternative of of, of not living in that world. But one thing about the Herman Hesse quote that started this conversation, is he talks about the self, and I think this is another aspect that I think is important to point out, is that in that Jungian term of the self, it's often this unified circular thing. And one idea that we have struck upon in our conversations is this idea that that Dad had when you enter this form, when you enter the form of this world as a human self, you're shattered and broken into pieces. And really, that pursuit of getting back to the self is in many ways a pursuit of gathering all the pieces and piecing them back together, making this sort of gluing the plate back together so that you can feel like a unified self. so you can remember what it feels like to be a complete or a somewhat complete human, or self or consciousness.
Mm.
And so one part of that magical kingdom is the game of, in many ways, life is this game, and you have to go around gathering pieces of knowledge and information, with the intention of this helping you put that plate back together again.
Mm.
I think to
And so,
yeah. Go ahead.
so, so part of that is you have to be willing to cooperate with things that with everything, really. That, as Caroline Casey says, is magic is the willingness to cooperate with everything.
Yeah.
So a lot of times these oppressors that you have in your life, or these things that seem super challenging, that you want to, that you try to avoid, those are oftentimes our biggest teachers. And you might need to face that in order to, um, pull out the gem that will help you glue the plate back together.
Yeah, I mean, you do. I would say, like, you have to face those things in order to get
Yeah.
through. I mean, at least in my life, and God knows I love throwing dramatic challenges at myself. Really, I'm a fan of it. But every time you transcend kind of a major belief or fear or limiting belief, I would say, the sense of empowerment and kind of like gratitude and grace and like humbleness that like comes through from that is worth it every time. I'm like, I feel like that's why we incarnate as these beings in seemingly limited form. And I mean that because like we obviously have some limitations. If you cut away our oxygen for long enough, we're gonna die, like physically. So there clearly are rules to this game. But we have, at least to me, like that self quote about the Hermann Hesse quote, like the self in a Jungian sense or a Hesse, and I know they were really like aligned in this. To me, that's what our imagination, our consciousness, our awareness is. Like that's literally the God, the self, the
Mm.
deity, all of the archetypes, all of the mythological figures wrapped into one. And I think as a conceptual reality, that's all well and good, but as a practical, direct live reality, um, you know, shaping some things before you experience them in this world, uh, is pretty fucking cool. I think that's also like the creative ability that more and more people are getting in touch with. And I think the pandemic is clearly a scenario where people can see this. I think the massive political shifts and polarizations are other symptoms and, things that point to this, including environmental stuff, where it's like, shit, we really got to fucking, if this is true, if this really is, this is like an individuation journey where we recognize we're the ultimate creative power in our world. What world do we want to be living in? Can we
Right.
shape that with our kind of consciousness and our belief structures? I've found so far, up until the point I'm wrong, that's just how shit works. Always, for everyone, all of the time. Our kind of remembrance of that is what we call synchronicity, what we call flow state. The pleasant experiences of it. People typically can ascribe those qualities to. But when you're like really in the thick of shit, when you're in the middle of 2020 and you're like, fucking, what the fuck is reality? And you remember this stuff,
Yeah.
that's when you're like, oh, thank God. Like, I see the point of this now. And I just feel like we did, everyone who's alive in this slice of time did like some heavy drugs. We found ourselves in these bodies. We're like, what the fuck? We got to ride this out until we physically die now. Jesus Christ. So I just feel like we're riding this wave, but it does seem to me, and I'm sure you guys have found this too, that like when you recognize that internal generative mechanism, at least you do have some control. In terms of dealing with the chaos, there is an empowering aspect of control, not in a manipulative kind of controlling type of way, but just like, hey, you can direct this ship with your perception. That's how
Completely.
awareness works.
Yeah.
Yeah. You invite in that possibility.
I think that also the biggest change, Noah, since you and I spoke, is I really now have come to the place where I believe I'm a spirit. And so I find myself drawn to books of the afterlife,
Nice.
of the spirit world. And somewhere in this pandemic, it came to me that I'm a spirit. I'm not gonna couch it. I'm not gonna try to be cool about it. And what do you really believe? I believe I'm a spirit in form having a human experience. So when Mikey's talking about that plate, that's the power of the self. That was our source coming into the game. And the earth experience, I mean, think about it. If you take energy and you explode it into form, earth, people, etc., everything, that's got to be a pretty remarkable moment that something becomes form, that an egg becomes turns into, and that's when the self gets lost because it gets caught up in all the
Yeah,
attractions and
totally.
seductions of the earth, which are so many that the spirit suddenly, which was put the whole thing together, now is suddenly the underdog. So I when
It's
we
a
come back
practical
to
mechanism though, right?
the mechanism begins with that I mean, that's why we're talking about the five spirits of the food and why we're talking about the spirit. The spirit is fighting for its life, and our job is to make sure we connect with it. Man's main vocation and profession is to find his way back to his self, the self with a capital S, the spirit part of who you are, the
Yeah.
authentic part. And if you lose that, you're doomed as doomed can be. And by the way, last thought, individuation applies to the world at large. It too undergoes individuation, getting rid
Of
of old
course, of course.
ideas and bringing, and we're in the middle of that, clearly. Because, and I think that the
Yeah.
world, or United States of America, do we want to be a material world and it's all about money, or do we want to be a spirit kingdom and all that goes with that? And I think those two are in battle. And
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant. I view that kind of forgetting what leads to potential imbalance as like a practical mechanism of incarnation. I do think what creates this world and our perception of it is a deep and abiding love of who we are at our core. So you believe you're Steven, you believe you're Mikey, I believe I'm Noah. These are like, we fell in love with this idea of physical form and enough also that we strung it together in this thing called time.
Mm,
Like, it's a weird thing that we like stitch this whole perception thing together. And when you say you're a spirit, what comes to my mind is I have this sneaking suspicion, not a bad way, that we're all dead anyway, that we're just like interfacing into this
Yes,
hologram
Noah.
that's like
Yes.
like I'm pretty sure this is what's going on. And it's like, it's not a bad thing. It's
No.
cool. And if you can
Right.
understand that and like project your particular perspective and experience on this screen and be cool and have a good time,
Yes.
as much as you can. And like, this doesn't mean like being detached from objective suffering in the world, but like that seems to be a very liberating and just from again practical, direct lived experiences, uh, effective way of navigating reality for me so far. It's been good because I don't think we ultimately what we're weaving together here as what we call life is us like phasing in and out of certain emotional, psychological, spiritual states of consciousness. And these also continue when we've shut the mechanism of the body off in the conscious mind. This is
right.
clear when people meditate or take psychedelics or just go to sleep at night. Like, it's going, your consciousness is still going somewhere. You're still that sense of I am, that creative force, God, whatever you want to call it, exists. Our remembrance of that as an active mechanism is, it seems to be a game of like hide and seek, amnesia, where we get tempted by the external realities of this world until we slowly wake up to the remembrance that we're kind
Totally.
of pulling the trigger here. And
Totally.
that, and I think what used to freak me out, I thought when that moment happened, and it happened to me like 20 years ago, is that like reality would collapse in on itself and I'd like die physically. It's not what happens at all. You just like take the joystick of what you viewed as kind of some external thing pressing down upon you. And you're like, oh, I'm like the player in this game, but I'm also like writing, producing, directing this entire narrative. And then your avatar, you here, waking life 3D does all this shit and you're like, what the fuck? That's my favorite experience in life, is when I start doing something and I'm like, how the fuck am I doing that? Like, I don't even understand like where this thing came from. Like overnight, sometimes I'm like, this is such a weird phenomenon, but it proves to me that we do have this ability to like phase and tune our perception and awareness. Um, and if we calibrate that towards what we're actually passionate about, what we really care about, what we want to experience in the world, and like really like have faith and conviction that our passion is leading us to where we're supposed to be.
Yeah,
I don't know, the world does get infinitely more beautiful.
but if you take
Yeah.
the ego,
If at the heart of the self,
what is?
if at the heart of yourself is conscious energy, um, then you, I don't know, I was going to just say like maybe this earth and this body that we're in is explicitly just designed to enjoy the pleasures of being in a physical form.
Yeah.
Like we put all these distractions and hurdles in front of us, these obstacles, and lose our way from just remembering what it feels like to be alive and to enjoy that feeling, because this could be a short-term thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like I like how you describe it as the remembrance. Like I think you could make a very strong case that we already know everything we need to know. It's ingrained in our
Totally.
every cell of our body. It's ingrained in the conscious energy that is within us. So our job is really just to remember.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
It's true.
that's the thing that's really important, because being in form, being in our bodies is really seductive. I mean, that's the ego, the Stephen, the Noah, the Mikey, it's pretty high, high-minded stuff to think that we're in form and we can taste and we can have sex and we can eat and we can travel, and who the hell gives a damn about the spirit? And that's the awakening. That's the point of the Hess quote. The real job is to get back to that self, because you can get seduced into the world that we're in right now and forget the energy source. It all comes down to energy. And the more you put the plate together
Mm.
in your life, the more you're increasing your energy and you're getting rid of the blocked energy that is all caught up in all the attractive illusions of this life. But when you go to the spirit and you start
Right.
tasting the spirit and following the spirit, my course is not an intellectual course. If you come across a truth in you, your job is to bring that truth into the world now, today. If you're not exercising,
Well,
start
well don't
exercising now. It's like,
don't you want to get better at being alive as you
yeah,
get older? Don't you want to get better
yeah,
at being alive?
yeah. You guys are still in the young course, but where I stand, this is the only thing that I got to get right at this point. I got to get this right, because that's where I'm at. I'm not going to be in this form for that
Mm.
much longer.
Mm.
And so my emphasis is really on it. It's all I really think about now these days. And oddly enough,
Mm.
so weird, by being isolated by the pandemic, which is terrible for Parkinson's, has kind of forced me into an inner world. And a lot of my students that I'm getting
Mm.
are also having to look at themselves more, because they're being quarantined. They're being limited connection to other humans. And in that part of it kind of forces you, or leads the way, or points a signal to you of the inner path.
What What stuff comes up there though? Because that's, I think everyone over the past, I mean, I was internationally traveling for a little bit, but I mean, everyone has gone through every oscillation of isolation and just kind of being forced to change their patterns as
Yeah.
they've known them. What did that bring up for you guys? Like Steven, you were just talking about, but I'd like to hear from Mikey too. But like what got brought up in these periods of kind of isolation?
Um,
Chad?
I loved it at first, but now, I mean, because I didn't have to go do crap. Like, there's nothing I can do. All I have to do, I have to stay at home and read books about the spirit. I wish I could go outside and go to Disneyland. Oh, I can't though. I have to be here. And so it was like a relief to not have to. It was like a snow day.
Do shit.
Yeah, it was just like the do shit really takes over your life. The do
Oh, tell
shit.
me about it, my friend.
Yeah, I mean,
My whole life sometimes is doing shit.
it's just doing like the
It's like,
driving back and forth,
I get it.
and you're doing that, and then so in a way, it's allowed. I mean, we're up in Maine, in this beautiful part of Maine, and far away from anyone, and I worry about the isolation because of Parkinson's, but I welcome the isolation in terms of reflection.
Hmm.
Kind of where I'm at.
Mm.
What about you, Mikey?
Yeah.
Mikey's more active.
Well, I
Mikey's much
I
more active in the world.
specialize I specialize in isolation. I do that
Yeah.
by choice a lot. So it was sort of it was it was a very familiar feeling while quarantine was happening. Um, but what I enjoyed was that I had started having really good conversations, reflective conversations with all sorts of people, my
Yeah.
friends, my family. It was this like collective moment to pump the brakes
Totally.
and 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 stop for a second and breathe and say, what are we doing?
Mm,
Because I think so much of this of our civilization, of our culture, is this like incessant need to just keep moving forward, like with reckless abandon, with no forethought either, no like multi-generational vision for the future, just like no progress, like
Right.
development, like keep growing, as if like infinite growth of that
Mm.
material kind is akin to uh achievement and success, as
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
there's actually wisdom in knowing when to not do something, when to pull back. um and so I thought quarantine was pretty interesting for um allowing this moment for everyone to kind of stop, um and have some reflective conversations in a way that we culturally haven't really ever had.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced, because the American machine is so dominant and so willful, that I'm not convinced that it's learned very much in this process. But I don't know. I At the same time, I do continue to have these conversations with friends and family where
Yeah.
it's like that feeling of waking up to
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people are feeling right now. I also think it's true. I also like this idea of growth unabated. Is like you're going to end up with a really weedy garden if you're just going to
Yeah.
let everything grow whenever. There is a time for pruning and cultivating the
mm.
things that you actually want to look beautiful. I love him, Neville Goddard, this mystical
Yeah, he's
thinker
great.
in the 20th century, had this idea of like pruning. Oh God, he's so fucking good. It's
He's
ridiculous. He's
he's
so
a
weird
you got
sometimes
me
too.
you got me into him. He's amazing.
He's so weird sometimes too, like, so he'll
Yeah.
just, like, he shit on Bob Hope for, like, 20 minutes for no reason. He called him stingy. I'm like, "What are you like, why are you airing personal grievances against celebrities, dude? What's going on?" But anyway, he has this idea that you basically prune the vine, and the vine is your conception of yourself and who you are, and therefore the world that you perceive outside of it, and at certain times, you need to like if you want to control where the vine goes, not out of like some weird kind of control freak thing, but just because you want to make it look like a very beautiful fruit bearing, whatever it is, if that's what it is, you just have to take some cuts there. You have to make it go this way. You have to make it go that way. Pull it back here. Don't just let it overgrow and become this thing because it's not actually what's best for the tree or the organism itself. So I think that's an important idea.
Mm,
This growth mindset, which to me, like the perverted aspects of capitalism, I'm not very judgmental about capitalism now because I do view it as like what you just described, Mikey, is like it's just a symptomatic reflection of this growth unabated mindset. And that's so easily like it's easy to get seduced by the symbolic representation of what that is, which is money, because that's like the primary energy exchange tool of how the modern world works, in quotes. Um, it's easy to get seduced into being like, oh, well, that shit is like the problem or the solution. But it is an internal imbalance. Like that's ultimately it's a mindset. Cause like what I've found interesting about I don't even want to say predicament, the situation we're in economically, morally, ethically, just where we are in everything. This is like the best moment of opportunity to really latch on to the idea of what we want the world to be and what we'd like to see in it, and then actually shape that. There's more opportunity amidst the chaos now than I've ever seen in my life. I'm only 37 years old, Steven. You've had more life experience than me, but like I've never seen so much opportunity because there's such a pause and how
Mm.
this system has been built up is on such a teetering precipice.
Yep.
It's like I love that. I'm jumping on. I've been taking money from the government. I fucking love this shit. This is incredible.
Oh,
Yeah, they're just making it up anyway.
well,
Yeah.
remember in the world, the man's true profession is to find, or what was the quote exactly? Is finding his way to his ego. That's the world. So the
Mm.
satisfy the needs of everyone's an individual. But can you imagine? And therefore, no one cares about the planet. No one takes it. A lot of people care about the planet, but they don't. We're not seriously taking it as a culture. And what would happen if everyone was thinking spiritually, for real, spiritually, authentic, not the phony religions Bill Maher talks about? But what would the world look like if people had awareness that they're spirits? How would we be treating one another? Where would money fit in? Wouldn't we be more balanced?
Money doesn't exist
It
in the
doesn't
natural
exist.
world.
Yeah, it doesn't exist.
Energy exists in the natural world.
Yeah,
Well, but
money's not a real thing. It's a piece of paper it's not even a piece of paper anymore. It's just a made up of digital bleep blop bloop.
but
That's why I have Bitcoin.
but
It's
it's the
literally made
ego.
up. It's
Okay, but
literally made up.
it's the ego's way of it's the ego's energy, right? I mean, that's how it measures itself. Is through
I mean,
Well, it's not. I don't think it's the ego. I think it's like in this human experiment, we, you know, as our hive is growing, it became this thing that was useful,
yeah.
so that you could, if you were growing olives, you could trade for other things and not
That
always
wouldn't
need.
be in your immediate vicinity, most likely.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
But but this is an experiment. We're in the sand pit. I love thinking of life as the giant sand pit.
totally.
We're still children in the sand pit coming up with more and more elaborate rules. But it's a land of make believe.
It is.
And the joke of it is that humans become so assured in the rules of the game as being reality.
right.
You get so lost
But not now.
in
Not now. Those
yeah.
rules are being
I don't even think it's
challenged.
just humans. I don't even think it's just humans. I think beings of all kinds get seduced into thinking of their own innate beingness,
Right.
which is true, but as part of a collective whole. That's where I think when you look at so like I'm real gentle with the way I use the word ego because just through a series of like visions, I don't know how to fucking describe it at this point. That's what they were. I just saw the ego kind of like a wolf, that if you have a good relationship with that wolf, that's a badass wolf that can help you out and defend
Mhm,
when it needs to. But if you
mhm.
don't feed your wolf and you're addicted to it, this thing's fucking rabid and it's all around. It's going to attack you and everyone else around you. So I'm pretty gentle with the ego, but I do think that when we get into the root that money doesn't exist, of course it exists. I have bills up the fucking wazoo. I totally understand that money exists, but as an energetic principle, the feeling that you have enough, be it money, love, grace, joy,
Mm.
whatever it is, misery, whatever you want to incorporate in there, literally is that belief and conviction of this, whether you recognize it or not, is what shapes your reality. I therefore love money because it's taught me so many times when I'm on like the fucking brink, when I'm like, what the fuck am I gonna do? I'm running out of money. I don't know. I have kids. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I fucking employ these kind of what maybe is like magical thinking to a lot of people. And sure as shit, this stuff works. And it's like you can't turn it's like a fucking magic trick that works every single fucking time.
That's true.
And, you know, I wouldn't have I'd have to be a piece of shit at this point. I've been saying this a lot. I'd have to be just like the absolute worst person to talk about this stuff this confidently if I didn't actually experience it every time. Then I'm actually a psychopath. Then I'm actually just someone who's just like, living a whole lie and has to deal with that reality. But I literally employed this stuff, and that's why I tell people to like test this shit out. Like test the feeling of having what you want out
You
on
know,
for size as you
how
go to
do you
sleep.
do that?
Sleep in that confidence and see what the fuck happens.
Well, so
How do
how
I
do you
do it?
employ it? Yeah, how do you employ it when you're in those moments?
Well, first of all, I think the biggest thing is for me in my life, the thing that I think is like the meta belief that allowed me to like experience this, oscillate from it, self calibrate again, and then kind of stabilize it is that I made a deal with myself. God knows when in time at a time that like I take care of myself. I handle my shit. Like I'm good. I don't fuck my shit up. And it looks like many times I'm fucking my shit up just objectively, subjectively, it even feels like that sometimes, but I know deep down I don't. So if, again, that comes back to that trust. And
Mhm,
this is the only trust that I think exists universally, just in your innate sense of like creative knowingness, I amness, awareness. I also intuitively and through direct experience know that whatever game this is, whatever we're in, the source of it is very loving. It is very
Mhm.
supportive. It is not something that is there to like fuck us up as part of the game. I just know that, and it's been my experience. Someone else could argue with a completely different experience, and they could say, no, that's not what I think. And I would say that's valid too. That's because that's their firm conviction and belief of what reality is. Therefore, that's true for them. And for me, whenever I recognize those kind of innate things, I've been blessed enough to get external people, relationships, and then the internal kind of mechanism of creative expression to like deal with this shit before it totally destroys any semblance of like cosmos in my life. And so like I've accepted the challenges and difficulties and kind of scariness and fears that can come along with like liberating your mind in that sense. And sometimes it's incredibly uncomfortable and it sucks. And it's totally being a human being is being a disembodied spirit and phasing in and out of reality. But if you can maintain, and this is why I think we like Jung, I think this is why, Mikey and I have a mutual friend in Duncan. If you can maintain a sense of like rascality and playfulness and like lightness about this shit, it's a pretty fucking cool place to be, regardless of what's going on out there. And if you have a hand in making it a cooler place to be, that's even cooler. So like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm having a good
No,
time.
for sure. The cosmos is a joker, always very funny, always playing little tricks.
I think
And
so.
and so beware of losing your sense of humor.
Yeah.
That's if it gets very serious, you're in the mud, you
You're
know?
off track just a little bit. Just
Yeah.
put it back on the tracks and be on your cool
Yeah.
vehicle, whatever you've
It's
chosen.
a much lighter energy to carry, to have a sense of humor and self-deprecation within the desire to sculpt a magical kingdom,
Yeah, and
Like,
it's all there too. This is like I think this is also the path of individuation. Like you realize all of this exists already, not as a predetermined course of action, but it's like it all is there and you're tuning in to your experience of it. And I know this sounds preposterous to some people, but like you actually can choose what movie you're writing, directing, and producing
right,
and playing in the projector. And I
right.
mean that not just for your own life, but like for globally, if that's what you want to do. Most people, though, I find, no, I don't want to say most people, but I know I made this mistake is like I thought like as soon as you encounter this innate creative power, like you're like world peace, boom, snap your fingers. Where's world peace? And then you're like, oh, it's not world peace. I did something wrong. It's like, no, it's coming in linear time. But it's like probably like look at the tea leaves. You can have it much easier to have world peace internally than it is globally. So focus with like what you have in front, what you're working with, which is just your consciousness. Because then you'll learn this whole thing it's just you, it's you projected outwards. That's literally, you will keep encountering that. I don't know. Someone can tell me otherwise. I haven't seen that not be the case.
I've been the what is it? Sam Harris. I've been listening to his meditations and stuff, and he's talking about consciousness, and that whole topic fascinates me. What is in your mind, Noah? What is, when you say consciousness? What does that exactly mean? Is that something that changes? It shifts? Is the consciousness where the spirit is? Well, I mean, what are we talking about here? Because
I think it's the same thing. I mean, ultimately, what it is, it's that sense of I am, right? It's that sense of when you strip away everything, there is
right,
still an innate presence that conceives of itself to be I am. And from that place, everything that is built and structured around that innate awareness, that's consciousness, that's awareness. Everything that's built around that is what we then call our perception, our experience of what usually we call reality, which now people are realizing is way shakier than what we thought it was.
yeah,
They're like, oh, this is reality. This is how it works. You know, it looks like this. And it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. Some of us, a lot of us, had this experience of kind of, I would say probably all of us, this not working and not really being an accurate depiction of what's going on. Now it's becoming more explicit and more apparent for people. And again, this is why I think really identifying that key source, like Neville Goddard uses what I love the term when it really clicked for me, is when he just labeled shit so clearly and was like, your imagination, your wonderful human imagination is God. It's like everything you've ever heard about God in any scripture and anything, that's your imagination. And he's not just saying this as a conceptual reality. He's like, test this shit out. Here are some techniques to prove to you that this is actually true. And what you perceive to be external reality is merely a reflection of your own internal kind of like machinations. So I was like, all right, this kind of lines up. I also had this weird experience. I think I've spoken about it to you, maybe to you both, but like 20 years ago, 23 years ago or so, I had the experience of like knowing I was Jesus Christ. And as someone who grew up Jewish and never heard anything about Jesus Christ, literally didn't know shit about him, I'm like, this is fucking weird. But I couldn't shake it because it was my felt known experience. Then I heard this dude talk about how every character in the Bible and any scripture are just psychological narratives. And all of the characters in them are just you and they're psychological states that you move through that ultimately culminate in this realization, Jesus Christ, that you are everything. You are your father. You are the son. You are the creative force of the universe and you're shaping everything. When this dude said that, I was like, oh, fuck. I was like, okay, I actually understand now what these experiences I've been having, what this has been leading to.
yeah,
And now at least I felt like, because I had proven to myself through pretty deep fucking work in this incarnation, that this is the only thing that remains. This is the only thing that no matter how far out, no matter how
that's right.
whacked out on psychedelics you are, no matter how far, it's this is you. So
It's
yeah, that's what I call
well,
consciousness
but
and
Jesus
awareness.
Christ, when you were going through that, really is coming back to the quote. That really is the self. That's the spirit self that you
Totally.
were thought you were,
Same thing.
because you are. But you can't walk around saying I'm.
Totally.
Yeah, it's one version of the story. It's one version of the story that is describing that unified self.
See,
Yeah, same thing. Same thing. We hear it in Egyptian Osiris. It's all the same mythology. That's why Campbell was a genius. Jung. All these people understood that it's the same metaphysical resonance and energy, and it's this constantly shifting balance between those energies and duality that
Yeah,
creates what we experience here. What's cool is, and I think this is like a very important thing that I think people are learning. I know I've been learning it. You have the ability to jump up to unity conscious perspective as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not selfish. There's nothing bad about it. But if a higher perspective on duality is unity, and you'll recognize that even ideas of morality, ethics, horrible objective shit, when you're in unity, that shit's allowed. That shit's perfect. And that kind of calibration, I think, is what we're perceiving now as these like radical polarizations in opinion and weather. I anticipate this will soften probably in the next. I don't know. I hate to give timelines, but I think
I
it'll soften. Yeah.
Well,
I hope so. I hope that that sense of attachment to perceived notions of reality softens.
Yeah.
Because um, it changes, it's malleable, and it's the attachment that is really the that's when you're not willing to go with it to the with the flow. You're
Yeah.
When you get attached, you're no longer in that flow state. I want to say something about you. You're saying consciousness is the phrase "I am." I would I would respond to that with the idea of consciousness. It would be defined as energy is.
Mm, yeah.
Um, because the universe is connected uh, by energy. It's all sort of this pulsating energy field, or energy fields that are reacting to each other.
Yeah.
And so maybe I am kind of says that, hey, well, you know that for certain as you sort of navigate these energy fields. But I really like the idea that consciousness starts with just recognizing that everything in the world is energy, just bouncing off of each other.
Totally. In
And so you
physical
can
reality
control,
and
yeah,
any conceptual
and
ethereal
you can
reality.
ultimately control what type of energy you wanna be.
and if you follow the path,
That's why I say it's the I am. Yeah.
go ahead. And if you follow the
Sorry,
path
go ahead.
to the self, your connection to energy increases. That the trip we're on in Earth, we get blocked from our source energy, and that's why you have to feed the spirit, because you got to keep it healthy, because that's the real source of our energy. And as I
Mm,
keep coming down to, I have less and less interest in people's early lives and more interest in how they're bounded by old perceptions. What Mikey was saying, not giving up the
mm.
old things that they've been attached to forever, as opposed to let them go. Let them go. Just be open. Be open in all ways. I love that quote that when you realize that everything you desire already exists, you're in a natural state of surrender. When you realize whatever you want, it's already here. It's already done. It's been done because you
Yeah,
imagined it. You're
that's true.
thinking of it, and that's what I think
That's
you're
true.
talking about, employing that. And I've used some of that from your lessons I've learned from your show. That when I imagine it and say it at night to myself, that this, send me this, or whatever I need, give it to me. Open to the universe, working with the universe. When you're following the spiritual path, you're working with the universe. Or what Jung said, the only thing that's important in your life is to figure out your relationship to the universe. Is it a friend? Is it a foe? Or where do you stand with it? Do you support it? Do you believe in it? And I think the work that Mikey and I have been doing recently is a belief in it, a strong positive belief
Mm,
in it. And if you follow it, it
yeah.
will lead you to where you need to be. It's just truth. And if you don't follow it, you're going to end up
Yeah.
with hard lessons. It's kind of thing. So does
Yeah.
anyone have any
I
last
mean,
thoughts
it's
on the
kind of
quote? On the quote? One more time, let me read it. The true profession of man is finding his way to himself. That's kind of what
yeah,
all
no, that's right.
go.
Yeah. I would just say the lessons don't stop.
Yeah,
No. Maybe at some point they do, but not not if we're talking like this. They're not stopping there.
right.
I don't think they stop, and I think the important thing is to embrace it. Like, I really like this one character in Tibetan mythology, who basically Tibetan, by the way, like this shit is only like 1,000 years old. We think of it some like ancient system. Like there's like grandfathers who remember some of the shit. So anyway, this guy supposedly was like flying around with magical powers. But anyway, he was this dude who would go around to all these like fucked up cursed places like in the Tibetan wilderness, and there'd be these demons, these rock demons and wind demons and she beasts and all these things, and he would be like, I love meditating in a nice meadow at the dew around me and the sun shining down. He goes, but I especially love being up in like a very uncomfortable, craggly, dirty, smelly place. Like that's what I love the most. And like what he's saying is he's not saying like I'm a psychotic person. He's recognizing the extreme potential for like when you really do embrace those types of environments psychologically, emotionally, spiritually in life with that type of like perspective, you're good. Like your experience of this reality will be a-okay. You're pretty much bulletproof, not in some like weak egoic sense, but in a full acceptance of the full spectrum of what you can experience as being a human being or being bound by certain forms or beliefs, which we collectively believe in. As much as I do believe that if someone truly believed they could fly, just like and levitate, they could do it. And I think people do that. But I don't think most people just are like going to flip that switch in their mind and be able to do it. But these shared deep collective beliefs are also there to be transcended. And I think that's part of what the healthy growth is in terms of a collective evolution. And I don't know, until I see signs, I don't know. I guess a lot of people looked at the Trump era, and a lot of people you could say argued, look at the idea we have of Nazi Germany before it turned really horrible. But until I see like real signs that our own human consciousness as energy or conceptualized as any other way isn't the creative force, I don't know. I'm still gonna use that as and I get in so many fights with my partner about this. Most of our fights now are like philosophical and they're like real fights, like feelings getting hurt, personal aspersions being cast, fraudulent, you're a fraud, all this stuff. So like I really unfortunately believe this to kind of an uncomfortable stance, but I do think that like it's a very important thing to at least play around with because I know a lot of people want to see this world and their worlds be more beautiful and harmonious. And we learn all the different keys of life and we get to play it like a piano. And the more keys you know, the more chords you can learn and the more sequences you can do. So I feel
Right.
like that's what we're doing. I feel like it's fun.
Yeah. All good.
Yeah, there it goes. That was waiting for the all good. That's how you know that it's wrapped up. That's it.
Guys, tell people about the podcast. And I know we've been talking about it a lot, but like, where can people find you? I'll have links to everything too, but like the best way to connect with you're doing. Also, Mikey, I know you did the Shell Jeff thing. I mean, the second part of it, I love it. It's perfect. Tell people what you guys are up to individually and just respectively with everything, where they can find you.
Go, Mikey.
In terms of the Dreams Course podcast, if you just search Dreams Course podcast, that will come up. We have, I think, 12 episodes out. We keep them between 15 and 25 minutes. So that we try to just kind of boil them down into some the principal ideas of the conversation. And we have at least 5 more on the way until we meet up again. Outside of that, I'm continuing to try to blend comedy with existential philosophy, and that's at the heart of Shell Jeff. So if you search Shell Jeff, there's Shell Jeff and Shell Jeff 2. Both of those are kind of are trying to tap into that idea of the inner thought process of someone who might be overlooked by civilization, who's working as a cog in the machine of the big oil companies, as a gas station attendant working at Shell. But he has his own dreams and his own imaginations, and
They're good thoughts.
he's either very stupid or very smart. It's not clear.
That's the only way to be, just to be clear in life. That's my stance.
Yeah.
I'm either a moron or a genius. Those are the only two possible things.
It's a fun line to walk.
Yeah.
And so just doing that and continuing to make comedy videos with Doug Pound. We do Two-Wet Crew, and I don't know, like, who knows what the future holds. I mean, I'm trying to proceed maybe at most 1 month at a time right now.
Yeah.
That's
a lot.
But yeah, I know that's almost not.
Herculean. Jesus.
Yeah. And outside of that, really just trying to keep these processes, these conversations going, and to just keep trying to get better at feeling alive.
And
I
surfing.
love it. I love it.
And surfing.
And surfing, which is, surfing is the physical manifestation of all of these ideas. Like it's like everything we talked about can
I
be
know.
summed up in one really good wave.
I met a surfer the other day, like over the summer,
One good way.
and it was a good thing. It was a good perspective to have on life. So, yeah.
Yeah. So,
I think we lost Mikey, but I'm recording this too.
all right. So on my end, I'm in Maine, and probably will go back to New Jersey. And since you and I have talked, and you really were instrumental in getting my course going, my course has evolved so much during this last year that it's now a real course. It's a real it has a real syllabus, and there's a real thing you go through, and ultimately it's one-on-one, which I love doing, and it's for people who are serious about the conversations we're having today, who want to put into their lives more of a following the inner life, more of an individuated life. And it's for younger people, 20s and 30s. I find this is weird to say, but older people get a little bit stuck to their ways, and they're a little bit more resistant to change. They can, and they're individuals we all know. I like to think of myself as one of them, but it's a much more fluid course for younger people because they're still, open to finding different paths to their individuation. And so I'm going to continue that, and it's been a blessing. And I don't do it for money, as you know. I do it for uh, anyone who takes the course with me. After I interview them and I take them on, they pay some sort of a fee they can afford to a Parkinson's cause, and that's what the course is about. I've reached my other goals, and now I'm just wanting to be a mentor and a teacher and learn. And I've said this many times: the Dream Course, I am the teacher of it, but I'm also the student of it. I keep learning through every person I deal with, and I'm so grateful and for that, because it's made a difference in my health, for one thing, selfishly. And I just love, don't
That's
you love,
awesome.
I love these conversations. I love authentic, I've said I've always loved I'd love to be in Paris, when life is healthy,
Absolutely.
sitting at a table with smart
Yeah, you sound
people,
great, Noah.
having all sorts of conversations, drinking good coffee, and watching beautiful people walk by, and just enjoying the day. So I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I'm grateful to you for helping me with that process.
It's always a pleasure. Well, I'm glad we got to do this. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm doing well. Let's catch up off air for sure too. This is it's always a good time connecting with you guys.
good deal. All good.
Cool. Thanks for listening to that episode. I like how I thank you for listening to the episode. I hope you enjoyed the episode is what I should be saying. You already listened to it. You don't need my thanks. Check out Stephen and Mikey on the Dreams Course podcast. You can find that everywhere podcasts are. It's their nice little 15, 20-minute short, quick hit episodes, unlike this one where we talk about shit forever. They're fucking cool. What else can I say? Big shout out to Ned again for sponsoring this show. Use the code SYNC at checkout. I don't got to tell you what to do. You know what to do. They're great. And the Patreon. Patreon is going strong. Bitcoin, I'll mention it at the end so people don't have to listen. Like, just fucking, I mean, I've been yakking about it a lot for the past 4 or 5 months. It's like 18 grand right now. Get into the Discord server, join the Patreon, check out what's going on there, ask questions, get involved. It's worth it because I know a lot of money stuff has been coming up for people, and start playing with your conception and notion of what money is as a symbolic representation of energy exchange. Cryptocurrency is a pretty good way to like change your mind about a lot of that stuff if you want your mind changed. Okay, that's it. Until next week, happy imagining.